Well, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of AI Inside, the show where we take a look at the AI that's hiding inside everything, including our, coordinating and organizing our communications through wiretap. That is one of the major topics that we're going to talk about on today's show. I'm Jason Howell, joined as always by my co-host, Mr. Jeff Jarvis.
Hello, boss. Good to see you. I was going to be with Jason on the couch doing a dig impersonation.
Totally.
But I got an earlier flight back from San Francisco, so here I am back, bleary-eyed and red-eyed, but here I am back.
Yeah, you did the red-eye flight. I feel for you. Those suck. I'm not a fan.
No.
Sometimes it's the only option you have, though.
I spent a few hours on the couch already, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So instead of the Dignation Couch episode, you took a nap.
Snoring couch, yes.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you here. Before we get to kind of our main event today, we're going to have an awesome interview that's coming up in a second. Just want to say a big thank you to those of you who do support us on our Patreon, patreon.com/AI Inside Show. One of our newest members, Clint Kennedy. Thank you, Clint, for your support. This is an independent podcast. This is how we run it, is through your contributions and your support. So thank you for doing that. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show. All right. We got the business out of the way. Now it's time to get into the main story at hand. And I'm so happy to welcome to this show. Talked with him many times on Tech News Weekly, over at Twit over the years. Joseph Cox, now 404 Media, and been doing the 404 Media thing for a while now. And I absolutely love the work you guys are doing there. But in this case, author of a new book that just came out called Dark Wire. How you doing, Joseph?
All good. Thank you for having me, and good to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you again. And once again, anytime I talk to someone who has written a book, and Jeff, I mean, you've written so many of these, like I have just a huge amount of admiration for someone who can collect and organize all this information and then put a book out there. It just seems like a mountain that's too steep for me to climb personally. Maybe I'll do it someday. But you have been working on a story for many years now at this point, and you've kind of collected all that information and released a book called Dark Wire. When is the official release date? Is it out in the world and in the wild at this point?
Yes, it came out on June 4th, so it's available everywhere now.
Excellent.
Mazel, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
It's a big day.
It's gotta feel good after all that work. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So here, if you're watching the video version, there you go. You can kind of see a little bit of what the cover is about. And, it says the incredible true story of the largest sting operation ever. And Joseph, you reached out to me not too long ago and said, "Hey, I've got this book coming out. Yes, it's about this massive criminal like dragnet, a data collection and all that, but it also has a really cool and interesting AI component to it." And it seems like, not a lot of coverage of the book so far is really focusing on the AI component. So that's what we can kind of have the opportunity to do today. Before we get to all that, it probably just makes sense for you to kind of give in your own words what this book is about. What is this story that you've been following for so long?
Yeah, so as you know, I cover the encrypted phone industry, and this is sort of a shadow tech sector that caters specifically to organized crime, drug traffickers, hitmen, weapon smugglers, all of that sort of thing. It's separate to Signal and WhatsApp and Wickr and Wire. They're, the apps we all use every single day. These phones and their related apps sell for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for a 6-month subscription. So in around 2018, moving up through the years as well, this particular app appears on the market, and it's called ANOM, ANOM. It's very cool. It's very slick. It has all of these amazing features. You can redact photos. You can scramble the voice. You can wipe all data from the phone. There's no GPS tracking, all of this sort of thing. It gets very, very popular with a lot of serious drug traffickers, multi-billion-dollar cartel leaders, except one thing. It was run by the FBI basically the entire time. And the FBI has been getting all of those messages, essentially, along with the Australian Federal Police, along with European counterparts. Obviously, there's a lot more to the story than that, but that's the broad strokes of it, in that this is unprecedented, both in like the FBI ran its own tech company with all of the sorts of normal issues and problems that any sort of tech CEO or tech company is going to face, but also just in the sheer scale, because, you know, they arrested over 1,000 people just from this one operation alone, with 10,000 police acting on the big day when they shut it all down.
Wow. What kinds of crimes were charged to the 1,000 people? Was it a broad range?
Yeah, I mean, primarily focused on drugs, but of course, that's already a really big sector, right? So in there, you'll have multi-ton shipments of cocaine. There's hash in there as well, a lot of methamphetamine, a lot of amphetamine. And then you have sorts of murders, assassinations,
Oh, well,
which obviously, I mean, it comes hand in hand,
The little
right?
stuff.
That's the little stuff. And
Yeah.
I guess the key thing there is that the FBI had to intervene as well as it could when it detected one of those threats to life. And I will get into that a little bit with the AI discussion. But then the final sort of pocket of crime is like when I spoke to the prosecutors and the agents involved, they were blown away by the amount of public corruption on there. You know, like government officials, people who work in airports, people who work in seaports, and they're the sorts of people who don't normally get arrested. You know what I mean? It's like you just get the criminals or the mob bosses, but this
or
allowed
New
them,
Jersey
like,
politicians once in a while. But yeah.
right, exactly. But here, it could actually allow them to see the people who don't get got, essentially.
Wow. One more question about that. Just then we'll get into the AI stuff. This sounds like the kind of the wholesale level over Silk Road and retail level. It sounds like it was the big deals were happening. Is that legitimate analogy?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. This is not like street dealers. I mean, sure, maybe the phones could trickle down to there, but it really targeted the top players. And you especially had people in Dubai, for instance, which is basically a hidey hole for a lot of organized criminals at this point. And that's also just how crime works, but also a benefit to the FBI, where a top tier drug smuggler at the top of their pyramid would buy the phone. Well, you can only speak to other ANOM people if you have the same phone. So that meant that it would trickle down, and then the people underneath would have it, and then have it, and then have it. And that's how it actually spread, because that's just how crime works and how it's actually organized.
Wow.
Yeah, I think what fascinates me about this story, and I do remember, God, I'm almost positive we brought you on Tech News Weekly, you know, throughout your reporting on this, because it's just such a fascinating kind of glimpse into, you know, how this works behind the scenes, and not a story we're used to hearing. But I have to imagine that when you're talking about criminals of this caliber at this tier, it's not easy to penetrate that world with something that ends up getting trusted and used by so many of them, yet it's a total honeypot, essentially.
It's the deep fake of deep fakes.
Yeah, I'm just amazed that they were actually able to pull that off, because and mind you, I don't know this level of criminal, you know, on a deep level to understand like how much they scrutinize these things, but I'm assuming probably a lot. How were they able to, you know, kind of get this past the sniff test?
Yeah, that's the thing. So obviously there's a lot of these different phones in this underground industry I was explaining earlier. What ANOM, and by extension the FBI, had to do was not just run like a good company, it had to be better than the competitors, basically, because you actually want people to come over, because I guess in business talk, there's a finite customer base, right? There's not an infinite number of criminals on the planet, and there's not an infinite number of serious drug traffickers, I guess. It's like you need that customer base and that demographic. So they did that by making it basically the most feature-rich phone you could imagine. As I mentioned, there's the images, there's the voice scrambling. It had a couple of other really crazy features, like the ANOM app itself was hidden behind the calculator. So you'd have to type in 2 times 2 press equals, that would fade away and the ANOM app would appear. And that sounds like really stupid. Yes, yeah. Exactly. And that sounds very stupid and a little bit of security theater. But drug traffickers love this stuff. They love the gizmos and the gadgets, and they sort of love the theatrics of it, because to them, that looks secure, even though it's not really. Like, it looks good. And of course, it's very expensive. So it must be a very good product as well. They marketed themselves as the Rolls Royce of encrypted phones, as one law enforcement official told me.
So how did AI enter into this whole operation?
Yes. So as you can imagine, they start getting a lot of messages because all
Yeah.
of these criminals, it starts in Australia with just a handful, then it goes to Europe, then it's sort of Asia, then it's South America. And I mean, there's two different problems there. The first is obviously a lot of those countries do not have English as their primary language. And you have a ton of FBI agents reading the messages like, well, what the hell does this say? Like it's in Swedish or something. So they do turn to Amazon Web Services for their sort of machine learning translation service. I think they used APIs and they could do that in bulk at scale. So you have the language thing. Then probably the more important bit for the AI is the sheer scale of the messages. It ended up going to something like 22 million messages by the end. And that's not just one big data dump. It's every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They get more messages. They have to go through all of them and review all of the images to then say, oh, this is a gun and maybe this person's going to be shot. We have to detect what is going on here and try to figure that out. And that's where AI comes in. The Dutch officials, their national police agency, they developed these AI programs because they worked on similar investigations before that would automatically surface the content of communications that they thought would be relevant to the investigators who were digging through it. So it's sort of a very, very interesting training set where it's just criminal communications, and it's just learning from the criminal communications. And this one of the specific examples given to me by the Dutch official I spoke to was that, oh, we can detect if this conversation is about cocaine, even if it doesn't contain the word cocaine, because of course they may be using a slang term, right? Which is, local to the Netherlands or maybe Colombia or something. They'll have their own slang terms, but the system could learn to surface those communications and then put them in front of an analyst and be like, hey, you should probably pay attention to this and you should probably read this as well.
Because it's picking up on those patterns and saying, okay, this keeps coming up. At some point, they're able to determine that that pattern actually equates to.
Well, it's also, I presume that there are human, in this case, law enforcement officials who are identifying, teaching the machine as well. Right?
Yes. Well, that's the really funny thing is when the FBI were getting access and then eventually they were speaking to Swedish officials and they kept saying, this is the FBI talking, what's the salmon case? We keep seeing the word salmon. What's the apple case? And the Swedes laugh because salmon is a slang term in Sweden for like a sum of money or something like that. Whereas the FBI thought there was going to be drugs smuggled in fish. And it's like, no. You completely misunderstand. So of course, the AI is helping as well, but you need that local institutional knowledge to then feed back into the system. And not even just the AI, it's obviously for the agents to understand them themselves as well.
Who's AI? So for the translation, they used what was available in the open on Amazon Web Services.
Yes.
What were the underlying models they used and technology they used for the AI? First question. The second question, did they get help in doing this from both AI companies, and I would think that social companies would have been useful? And there's a lot of connection in cybersecurity and trust and safety with government and the social companies. Was this so secret they couldn't get help? I mean, how did that whole relationship work with the technology industry?
Yeah, it's basically the latter because of the sensitivity there. This system, at least on the FBI side, was developed in-house. So they made this sort of the surveillance back end of ANOM was called Holler iBot. I couldn't tell you why they called it that, but that was the name, and that was on all the documents I obtained. And you would log in, it would have a little, screen, and you could read all the messages, all of that sort of thing. But I was told that was made in-house by FBI computer scientists.
Wow.
Because I don't think you're going to outsource that sort of thing because it's a super specific use case. And they made that Holler iBot system not just for the FBI, but they also, of course, wanted to make it for the European officials who were eventually remote into the system as well. But then, of course, as I said, this started in 2018, went up to 2021. What happened during that time? The COVID pandemic. So they had to quickly spin up production and accelerate production on this tool because nobody could come into the office. So they had to very, very quickly make Holler iBots so they could, now we can tap in and get back to our jobs. Yeah.
So did they hire people away from AI, from colleges? Did they get them trained in this technology? I mean, we weren't yet at the point of, I could get an LLM to write my code for me. This is high-end technological effort and expertise, isn't it?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're right in that it's highly specialized, but also the timeline. Like this is pre-commercial OpenAI and ChatGPT, so it's in-house computer scientists, and I think that's like a role inside the FBI that's basically often overlooked by the public. You have these very large teams inside the FBI who are doing any number of things when it comes to computer science and their applications, and like that could be developing turnkey solutions for very specific problems like this. But then it's also, we need somebody to develop a tool to break into an iPhone, or we need to remotely hack into a computer system. And often they actually buy those externally, as I've reported elsewhere as well. But sometimes they are configured or tweaked or built entirely in-house, and we never really hear about it because it doesn't match the stereotypical image of a FBI agent with a badge going out, when actually a ton of the work is being done behind a desk somewhere in Virginia, or in this case San Diego.
So let's get Snowdonian and paranoid for a second. All of this technology and all this ability, I presume, is useful for just plain old POTS, wiretaps, and surveillance of other sorts. Do you think this is being used elsewhere in this country and other places?
Well, the thing that it brings up for me is that I don't know if you've spoken about this previously or if you've seen this, but Axon, the law enforcement contracting giant, recently released its own product, which is based on OpenAI, which will take the audio from a body cam sort of from body cam footage and will automatically generate police reports based on that footage. It's just from the audio, that sort of thing. And I found that very, very interesting because that comes out a few weeks ago before my book came out. And I've been sitting on this information about the FBI and the Dutch officials using AI. And I'm like, wow, that was quick. It's already gone from the FBI to now local and state police. Like, obviously, it's not exactly the same sort of technology, right? But broadly, the application of AI is being applied much more broadly than I think we would anticipate inside law enforcement. And it kind of just happened, and we didn't get to really talk about it. And now it's already here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Not only that, like, I think what's fascinating about this is this is stuff that we just normally don't hear about. Yet people's imaginations run wild with the kind of access that is provided to law enforcement behind the scenes, what they're able to do with it. But it's been a lot of guessing for a long time. So this is really just kind of confirmation that, yes, they are able to do this. I guess, what does this say about the kind of the ethical implications of, potentially the overreach of an operation like the ANOM operation? I mean, this is quite a scale that we're talking about. And being able to scoop that up and do all of that analysis on a broad scale, that certainly concerns, privacy advocates. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, on one side you have the AI stuff, and I still think there are a lot of open questions about, well, how effective is this AI or any other that law enforcement may use at surfacing particular pieces of information? Is it reliable in that? Is there any bias in that? Can we see the process, and can we see the results of that as well? That's going to be case by case, product by product, but I think those are valid questions. When it comes to the scale of operations like ANOM, and there's two others, one called EncroChat and one called Sky, where the police didn't run those companies, but they hacked into them, and they were encrypted phone companies as well. There's so much data there, and so many people use these phones that I did find it sometimes did include people who were not suspected of a crime, and especially like defense lawyers. And their only quote unquote crime was that they were defending a drug trafficker. And you can think whatever you want about drug traffickers, but they are entitled to legal representation as well. That lawyer has not been suspected of a crime. Now, maybe that's actually not an issue for you, and maybe you don't think that's a problem. Okay, sure. Well, then the next stage comes, and there's a cryptographer at the end of my book who sort of puts this thought experiment forward. And he asks, okay, well, what happens when the criminals move to other networks that we all use, like Signal or WhatsApp? And I've spoken to drug traffickers, and I've spoken to people who sell these phones, and they say that is what some of these criminals are doing because they don't trust the encrypted phones anymore because of ANOM. So is the FBI just going to go home and give up and not investigate anymore? No, I think that would be ridiculous. It's now what happens to the other platforms where there are more quote unquote ordinary people, members of the public. Like, could they be swept up in it? We don't know. But in Europe, there's legislation where European authorities want to be able to scan the content of encrypted messages, initially for CSAM content, but they've already said that they want to expand that to other crimes. It's like, it's not even hidden. They're just coming out and saying it. And I just think there needs to be much, much more debate about it, because with this ANOM case, it does show the extraordinary lengths that law enforcement will go to access encrypted communications, including running a tech firm outside of the FBI San Diego field office.
I wonder whether they had foosball.
They had a lot of pizza, a lot of pizza.
Snacks in the kitchen.
I was just visiting a friend at Google yesterday, and boy, they have good snacks. Jesus, they have good snacks.
They do.
I presume I'm going to keep my Snowden mask on for just one more minute. I'm not normally the paranoid one, but I will for a second. I would imagine that a lot of these skills are endemic to what the Chinese internet does and what other governments do. And so I'm curious about how this passes over the bloodstream. One way is that Western law enforcement could learn from what authoritarian governments did. But the other is that as this becomes public, was any of the technology published as scientists do? Is it just known now? Is it going to be available to bad regimes, including possibly soon in this country?
Well, that's the thing. Even though the FBI has announced the operation, because that was part of their goal, they wanted to come clean, so to speak, to sow that doubt inside the criminal community. Because they'd be like, hey, look, we were running the company. You can't trust these phones. And I understand why they did that. They still didn't give many details, which is why I wrote a 300-page book about it and spoke about all of that. But when it comes to the technology spreading, yes, it goes more back to, I think, the Axon example, in that the specific technology, the specific LLM used in any sort of single operation, maybe that stays in-house, maybe it spreads, maybe it's repurposed. But I just think generally there is absolutely going to be a push towards more artificial intelligence used in policing, because, as you say, you do look at China and you see this, omnipotent, omnipresent use of facial recognition and that sort of thing. And of course, there's been lots of great reporting about Clearview AI as well. We're only getting closer and closer to that sort of thing. Now, of course, the key here is that ANOM was a network primarily used by criminals. I know I said I found examples of ordinary people using it, but again, primarily criminals. It's when they cross over into that almost 51% of normal people now, that is where it's going to feel very, very different.
Well, and also the AI kind of systems that are trained and designed to analyze all this data, that is a big crossover point too. Like, no matter how the data is acquired, be it through a specialized phone that targets only criminals or the open internet, there's still the tools that are fully capable of this very specialized kind of analysis of, is there something wrong happening here? And that does cross, as you said, Jeff, that crosses the bloodstream and touches on all points. And I imagine even more so, year after year, as these systems improve, as more of our communication is done in highly trackable ways and highly collectible ways.
Yeah, the only thing I would sort of add on that is that I've been talking a lot about the messages that were intercepted, and of course that's the most valuable data. But what the FBI also got was an incredibly powerful map of somebody else's connections. And it got to the point where these ANOM criminal users were talking to each other so much that one of the FBI officials who I heard from, he explained it less as a messaging app, as a social network for criminals. Like, it became the Facebook of drug traffickers, because they had their little circles, and then this circle is their close contact, and then they speak lots to this person. It's the sort of pattern of life analysis that a lot of AI is being used to do, or I guess machine learning a little bit more specifically. But I can absolutely see that expanding into other forms of policing as well. I mean, I've reported before about how DHS is using AI-powered products to analyze social media when people cross the border and that sort of thing. I really don't think people appreciate how much AI is in law enforcement, in federal, in border enforcement, and even local police now with the Axon stuff.
And what's interesting too is that in me, and I'd love to maybe cross another bloodstream here and hear how this affects your coverage and worldview at 404. But the tech companies and the AI companies are often presented as the evil, too powerful being. But what fascinates me about this story, Joseph, is that the authorities didn't need the technology companies.
Yeah, well,
right?
They made their own.
They made their own,
Yeah,
right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so I think we focus on trying to find the body, the actor who's evil. If we can just stop them or regulate them, then everything is going to be okay. No, it's just technology, and you can use it for whatever the hell you want to use it for.
Yeah, and if you feel like it, you can go and do your own spin off of it, and you can make your own copy and tweak it as you see fit. I mean, the cat is out of the bag with AI, right? I mean, we all know that. That's a very obvious point to make. But I really, really think that's the case where we're only going to see more of this in more operations going forward for like absolutely sure. And I really think it could be on the smaller scale as well, where maybe they won't run an entire phone company, but let's say we have all of these, just normal wiretaps. I think you mentioned earlier, we'll use AI to quickly churn through those. I can absolutely see that happening as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how has this affected? I mean, you've been covering this for a long time, so it's obviously affected your Weltanschauung, your worldview throughout. But 404 is an investigative technology operation now. May motherboard rest in peace. And so you probably already have a somewhat paranoid view of the use of technology, but I would imagine this only amplified that. On the one hand, on the other hand, we talk a lot on this show about test creale and long-termism and the doomers and all of that, and I mock them because it's that future risk is BS. It's the present risk, and you very much have a story of present risk and technology. So sorry for the long-winded Joe Scarborough-like question here, but how does this affect your own worldview of your coverage at 404?
It does in a few different ways. I mean, we cover AI constantly, and I genuinely think you should speak to Jason Kepler as well, one of my co-founders, who's doing a lot of stuff about AI and Facebook spam and that sort of thing. And what we really focus on is that while everybody is talking about these hypothetical risks, which are like really, really far in the future, or they're just not really tangible, we are super focused on talking about the real harms or, sometimes benefits that are happening right now. So one of my co-founders, Sam Cole, she was the first journalist to uncover deepfakes. And she's always said this is being used to harass women, for example, which is obvious. And now it seems that people are coming back to that and being like, oh, yeah, it's used to harass women, right? Yeah, we've been talking about that for a very, very long time. And it's still happening. And yeah, exactly on the screen now, she published this piece just recently about legislation that's going to go forward and potentially forget about the other people who are impacted by it. So you gave a very long question. I'm giving a very long answer, but the summary of it is that we really try to focus on the human, actual, tangible, concrete impact that is actually affecting people now, rather than like this floaty sort of abstract idea in the future. I mean,
amen, brother. Amen.
Yeah,
well, it's also it's not just the human impact. I think that's part of it, but it's also what's fascinating about your story in the book is it's the human actors. Yeah. Again, it wasn't the technology company. It wasn't some really reinvented technology. It was the use of present tense technology for things that, and as Jason said at the beginning, you might think is a good use to get rid of crime, but that has serious implications. And it came from within government, which is fascinating. How many governments were involved in the end?
There was something like 16 involved in the end. But just on that, when you say it's also the people behind the technology, I entirely agree. And I think that's really important here because this is their own description. The people I've spoken to in San Diego, they saw themselves as a group of cowboys, essentially, who were like, we have this amazing idea. We're sick of how drug crimes are prosecuted in the United States. Let's do it different. Let's be really, really bold. And they were told multiple times along the way by low management, middle management, and actually some people at the top of the DOJ as well, that you can't do this. This is stupid. This is ridiculous. But they persevered and they pushed through it. And I do think that goes to show, again, there were people behind this operation. And if there had been other people, it just simply may not have happened. It was this crazy harebrained scheme from like a handful of FBI agents and prosecutors. This could have easily not happened if they just didn't have the audacity to do it,
Okay, so the important question here, Joseph. Movie deal?
It has been optioned by Netflix, yes.
Oh, yay! Mazel, that's great.
It's coming. I know. That's amazing.
That's exciting. Was it optioned? I'm curious, was the book the forcing mechanism to get that option, or was your coverage already being talked about as an opportunity? Did you need the book to sell the movie?
It was the book proposal. So a while ago at this point, but because I'd covered the story for so long, even though I didn't have all of the granular details, I knew the arc, I knew the story inside out. That's how it came about. And of course, I went in with the goal of writing a very entertaining nonfiction true crime book. That was just my goal. That's a new challenge. I'll do that. So I wrote it like a movie as well. I don't know whether I'll be effective. That's kind of up to the people who read it, right? But that's what I was going for anyway. And I hope that comes across. Yeah.
Okay. Other showbiz question. I'm a former TV critic. What are some of the great characters in the story? One or two, and who should play them?
Oh, that's going to be really, really hard.
On the
not
spot.
Me. I'm not in it, and I don't want to be. I would just say that, there are some really, really interesting law enforcement characters who are very determined to do what they think is right, even when they're told you can't do this. And then there are some very interesting drug traffickers, one being a guy called Microsoft, not connected to the tech company, just called Microsoft. I don't know why.
Interesting.
Who is very, very crazy. And there's another guy called Hakan Ayik, who's one of the world's biggest drug traffickers. He's in there as well. I couldn't say who should play them. That's, I'll leave that to the experts.
How about the nerd side of the story? How about the FBI nerds?
That maybe I could do that one. I could probably fill in the nerd role. But there's a ton of characters in there, and I hope that people find one that they can latch onto. Like, my favorite character is Microsoft, just because he's so crazy and so colorful and entertaining. But there's something in there for everybody, I think.
That's just amazing. That's amazing.
Well, you continue to do amazing work, Joseph, and I'm so happy you reached out about this. I'm so happy you put it on my radar. Dark Wire is the name of the book. It is out. Again, the incredible true story of the largest sting operation ever. And it is fascinating to hear you kind of detail the fruits of all of your work over the years. And I'm definitely going to be checking this book out and waiting for the movie on Netflix. That is so cool that that's happening. You got to be so happy about that.
You are the Howard Stern king of all media of geekdom.
I'll take
podcast,
that.
Site, book, movie.
I know, right?
Print.
Yeah, probably.
A newspaper.
Right on. Well, 404 Media, everybody obviously needs to follow you and your team's work at 404 Media. You guys are doing incredible work over there. I love what you're putting out. And then obviously check out the book. Joseph, thank you for reaching out, and love to have you back sometime when there's a crossover. We'll definitely reach out. Yeah. And you do the same, please.
Yes.
I just downloaded the audiobook.
Wow, thank you.
Excellent.
That's one sale.
I've got a book coming out from Hachette also in the fall called
There you go.
The Web We Weave. So you always be selling.
Sure.
Always be selling. Everybody who watches this show can recognize that I will sell the Gutenberg Parenthesis magazine and the Web We Weave constantly and obnoxiously. It's a retail battle. Joseph.
All right.
There you go. Find a bookshelf in the back and throw a copy on there so people see it, even if you don't mention it. There you go.
Yep.
Joseph, thank you again. It was a pleasure catching up with you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Anytime.
it.
Anytime.
All right. Right on. Take care.
I was at a bookstore 2 weeks ago, and I found a copy of the Gutenberg Parenthesis, and it was kind of hidden in the digital section, and I moved it up to the front of the store.
Heck yes. And I bet you're not the only person to do that. The book goes into a bookstore, and you're like, this is not where it needs to be. It needs to be right here at the front door, facing everyone.
So thank you for arranging that with Joseph. That was fascinating.
Oh yeah, he's one of my favorites. He was always so much fun to bring on TNW, and I say fun also through the lens of fun and frightening at the same time, because usually the topics that he's researching and reporting on go deep, and this book sounds like very similar lines as well. So everybody should check that out. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We've got a short amount of time left, so we'll squish some news in there in a moment. All right, so here's what I learned this week, Jeff, and I think I'm starting to just go ahead and come to terms with this. NVIDIA has, big chip news that they announced. Intel had a big laptop chip news that they announced.
Yep.
Raspberry Pi, which I didn't see that one coming.
No, I didn't either.
Had some big chip news to announce. And you know what I'm realizing? I realize that this stuff is really important. I realize that AI chips and, you know, the advancement and everything, like obviously it drives the industry. But man, when I attempt to pick apart some of these news announcements, I get lost in the details. And really at the end of the day, I come out of the other end going, all right, they're faster, they're cheaper, and you know, they're more performant or whatever the case may be. There's so much detail in how and what these chips are, and that is just kind of lost on me. Maybe that's not the kind of thing I should admit, but there we go.
No, I don't think you're lost in the details. I think you, and I would put myself in the same bucket, of course, are lost in their hype, because it's constantly bigger, huger, faster, right?
It's like, okay,
and to what end? It's like when I watching Jensen Huang's last keynote. He's had one or two since then.
Yeah,
where it was just this. We talked about this in the show. It's this expanding of this huge capacity, and you have Elon Musk saying, "I'm going to build the biggest goddamn thing." It's all very macho, size matters stuff. And I constantly quote the Stochastic Parrots paper, where they mocked that and said size doesn't matter. Getting bigger, it only makes it more difficult to manage and to understand what it's doing, and it doesn't necessarily perform better to your goals. So it's the ultimate case, I think, of a tool looking for a problem to solve, and so I think it's just marketing hype now. And I know that's simplistic, and the size and the speed do matter, but I don't think that there's necessarily a vision for where.
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is actually interesting because you said, you know, one of his previous kind of reveals or whatever, you know, it was only 3 months ago that NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang announced the Blackwell kind of direction for their AI chips. And now here we are 3 months later, and yes, they were announcing kind of an extension of the Blackwell chip, but he also said, what did he say? He had a quote where he was like, "I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to regret this," and then announced the next generation, which is called the Rubin, or maybe just Rubin. The Rubin kind of sounds like a sandwich. Rubin platform is in 2026, Rubin Ultra in 2027. And like, I'm reading through it and I'm like, you know, there are some people that read these announcements. They're like, oh man, can you believe it? You know, it's got all these doop-a-doo, and they're naming off the acronyms and everything. And for me, it's just like, it always comes down to, you know, cost and energy savings, faster performance. Right. It's like, okay,
it's a chip. It calculates things, and it does things in a different way from old chips. I mean, I'm old enough to remember, the PDP 8080, you know, is out. And then when I watched the original Twits, they would talk with excitement about a new chip. And we've never really known what it matters. I was thinking the other day, you remember that one Intel chip that had a math problem built into it? That was in PCs. This was some time ago. This is a long time ago. But I was thinking, what if there's in the grand complexity of these chips? What if there's a mistake? Right? What impact might that have? I just looked up NVIDIA stock, and by the way, I'm sure I have some of it in my various funds. 6 months ago, it was at $465, and right now it is at $1,217, $1,217 for a share. That's incredible.
That is incredible.
So,
I mean, you know,
speed and size matter in the market. That's why
right tech, right time. You know, a lot of people are looking at Jensen Huang and saying, "Oh, he's the Steve Jobs of AI," you know, and all this stuff. I mean, or the other analogy is that. What is it? They're handing out the shovels. What is the shovel analogy? It's like when you've got you're not cashing in on the gold rush. You're the one that sells the shovels, and that's what NVIDIA is doing for the world of AI right now. They're in the right place to make a killing.
Tell me if I'm wrong here, but it occurs to me that, I mean, Jensen Huang has his own look with the leather jacket, and Mark Zuckerberg's jealous of it, and so on and so forth. Is he the first chip celebrity?
Oh, that's a good
I
question.
mean, you had
I
Hewlett
mean,
Packard, you had moguls owning chips. I don't think you ever had this
sure.
kind of
But this
personality.
like flashy kind of like,
Mhm.
oh, I know exactly who that is when they walk,
Yeah,
yes. He's got a certain visible style to him that is in some ways reminiscent to Steve Jobs,
it
that had
really
the,
is. Yeah.
the black turtleneck kind of aesthetic or whatever. But
And
yeah,
Intel was always something inside. You didn't know how it operated, but it was in there and you cared about it. Now
yeah.
it raises to the surface this brand and its capabilities. And it's kind of fascinating to watch. At the same time, that to the average person, the technology won't matter at all because you're just going to speak your language to it. That's what it
Hmm.
enables. The complexity of
Hmm.
it makes simplicity. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
So there was
interesting.
a
I think
ton
you're right.
of that kind of news this week, and we don't understand it all. We're not going to understand it all. And we don't have to understand it all.
Well, and it's like I sometimes struggle when I'm faced with this kind of avalanche of this particular type of news. Like I've tried for years to read through a lot of the, the hyper threading and the multi-cores, and it's like on a grand level, I understand why it's better, but there are people that read that get really excited about the possibilities and, oh, this is what this means. And for me, like I said, it always just kind of gets distilled down to, better, faster, smaller,
Yeah,
cheaper,
yeah,
whatever. And
exactly.
like, Intel's Lunar Lake laptop chip, two memory sticks attached, 16 and 32 gigs each. Like, okay, I could see why that's something to celebrate, but I don't know. Like maybe I'm just the wrong person to
Well,
evaluate why this is like incredibly important outside of those things that I said it gets distilled down to. You know.
before we got on the air quotes air with Joseph, we were doing media geekery and talking about scale, and that a 404 is not Vice, and it's not
Right.
Time Inc. of old, but
Sure.
it's big enough, right? And scale's a paradoxical thing around the internet and now around the technology. And I write about this in both the Gutenberg parenthesis and the Web We Weave. Sorry for the two plugs, but always be selling. Um,
Hmm.
that uh, we assume that everything had to be huge, and now things are more at the human scale because of the huge scale. That is to say, the internet connects everyone. Ergo, you can find the 5 people who have the same interest you do.
Hmm.
And these chips are of massive scale in their abilities, and that's just what enables them to speak our language and bring it down to a human scale. And
Mm.
that's the technological paradox of scale that I think we see here. But part of this is also just simply about male testosterone.
Yes.
It's about, I want to be bigger than everybody else.
I'm bigger than everybody. Yeah, no kidding. And that is something that we see time and time again in the world of technology. Want to give a shout out to the Ozone Nightmare. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
the super thanks. Says Jeff, your point is exactly my issue with all this hype frothing. I've never heard that word before.
I like how to
I'd
steal it.
be far more interested in a leaner, more focused tool than a bloated and aimless behemoth. So there you go. Thank you so much for sending that in, the Ozone Nightmare. So anyways, and and I did mention very passingly about Raspberry Pi, which I actually think is, that's kind of cool. Anytime the Raspberry Pi does something, I'm always for it, just because I love what they've been able to do for very little money, for people who are kind of computer enthusiasts and want to play around, and essentially they are bringing an AI chip for the Raspberry Pi microcomputer, the Pi 5 to be specific. It's partnership with Halo, and the kit costs $70. So if you have a Raspberry Pi 5, you can buy their partnered AI chip and run native AI apps on even the Raspberry Pi. That's where we're at right now.
If Heathkit were still alive today, you'd be buying a kit that has AI in it. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. No kidding. No
Do you even
kidding.
know what Heathkit was?
It sounds familiar, but
Oh boy.
no.
It was for your ancestors as nerds. It was, you could build a radio, you could build all kinds of technology because you bought
Oh,
the kit
yes. Okay.
and
Yes.
you were more into it, and you'd solder the resistors. But
I
that's fine.
love that. Yes, absolutely. It's a wonderful way to learn. I love it. Oh, okay. I'm looking at it.
This is why I have old
Um,
guys around, Jason, so we can have old references that nobody gets.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was like transitioning to the next story, and so I apologize. It like escaped me there for a second. Google bringing some technical rather improvements to its AI overviews. We talked a little bit last week about how people weren't very happy with the results that they're getting in AI overviews. And so Google says they're making changes that you will notice. They said they addressed, I think, something like a dozen different issues that they noticed that were producing nonsensical queries. So they say they've made these improvements to detect those, whatever that means.
Probably most of it was don't quote Onion.
Yes, exactly. Well, so Google claims that the issues were, okay, first of all, they say not many people were seeing these. They said it were found in 1 out of every 7 million AI overview queries. But, you know, again, when you're talking about scale, it's still, and it seems like more people were seeing it than that. But anyways, they said that if data for a particular query was missing, it would sometimes turn to satirical content that you're talking about. Go to the Onion. So it's like, I don't have anything to put back here. Oh, sure, this will do. We'll just pull the information from the Onion. Probably not something you want to do in your search.
Well, also others rewrote what I saw in one of those cases. I think it was the Rocks case. Somebody else had rewritten the Onion story for SEO purposes. Didn't matter. It was just they just rewrote it just to try to get some traffic, and that appeared higher than the Onion as a regular search response. And so the machine wasn't wrong to say, "Oh, I guess that's news."
Yeah,
because it was being fooled into it by nefarious actors.
Yes. Yeah. So they're Google also said that they're going to cut back though on health content overviews related to health content and hard news, and so I guess they're drawing the line there, which is probably. I mean, health content obviously pretty smart. People don't need to be eating rocks, you know. So,
but they will never get rid of. They'll never make LLMs as they now exist credible, in my view. Do we have time for you to do your demo?
Yeah, I think so.
This, I think, leads to the problem with the future web. Is that Jason's about to show you a mechanism to really, really easily make reports or pages, and I predict this is going to fill the web with yet more junk.
Yeah, so this will be interesting. So thank you for giving me just a few minutes to do this. And leading up to the show, yes, we were kind of chatting back and forth, and you sent the message, and I was like, oh, I was not prepared for that. You said, glad regarding perplexity pages. It is how the web will finally be ruined for good. I'm like, oh no, do I want to show this off? Like, I don't want to ruin the web, but I am a Perplexity user, and they did announce and add a new feature called Perplexity Pages. And essentially the idea here, and I played around with it a little bit, is that you could take, one of your or any number of queries that you put into Perplexity to ask the LLM, and instead of getting just like a bullet point list or a summary or whatever, you can turn it into kind of a more multimedia shareable piece of information, organized piece of information. So to my view, like this is one that I created through so I'd watched a video. We're getting ready for our trip to Italy, and this morning I watched a video on YouTube. Woo, that is very loud to me. I know you don't hear it. On the Away Together YouTube channel, so give them full credit, where they were saying, don't make these Europe packing mistakes. So I was like, okay, great. So I watched the whole video. So I did give them a full watch. And then I was like, well, I want to this was a very useful information for me. I want to organize this in a way so that as we're getting ready over the course of the next week, we pack accordingly. And so, I got the transcript of that. I ran it through Perplexity, and then I turned it into a page. And so basically, and I don't think that it's as detailed. Like, I don't think that it got all the pieces of information that the video does. So there's that, but it's a way, and actually I could probably just.
Did it take a screenshot from the video?
So no. I fed the transcript into Perplexity, and I said, all right, organize. So I said, create a comprehensive summary, organized in an easy reference way that includes all the major talking points of this video transcript. So this is what I got from Perplexity to start off with. It's kind of, and this is what I would normally do if there's like a video that I watched that I just want to get notes on it and I don't want to have to watch it again. I could do this and I get the notes, right? So then what I can do in Perplexity is I can go up here, convert to a page. And so I'll click that, it sends it through, and it says it's writing, and you watch in real time as it kind of puts this together in more of kind of a presentable way, let's say.
It's very
so it's
impressive.
Not just notes.
That's the problem with it. It's very impressive. It puts together
So,
a nice package.
So the problem is it does this well. Is that
yeah,
is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So you can see tons of PR people and people wanting to get affiliate links. We'll just be able to manufacture this junk at scale. And this isn't junk per se, but people will use it to make junk. I'm also flashing, Jason. I can imagine at your house, your wife and daughters say, "Oh, Jesus, Dad, why are you're using AI to tell us how to pack? Come on, man."
They don't know how I come up with what I come up with. They just know that I do.
Jeez, you're so man. You're such a man.
Yeah. But see, and so what you can do in here, so once this ends, I'll show you just kind of a little bit of an extension here, which, kind of goes further to the point of like creating a presentable package is, I can go up here and add media to create the like hero image. I could upload something, or I could just tell it, all right, generate something. This is a how to pack for a trip through Europe. So I'm just going to tell it to generate an image for the hero image, and it'll use its image generation to come up with a backpack. Sure, why not? There we go. And I could change the way that looks and everything. And you could do this for each of these particular points as well. And it's so cool. And beyond that, then the next step of that is, of course, the publish button. So if I hit that, I now have a link that I can copy. I can share it out to people. So I can say
it's hosted by Perplexity with a URL.
Yes. It appears to be hosted by Perplexity. I can copy that link, open up a new URL, and it takes me. I mean, I'm logged in, so most people wouldn't see that stuff, my history and everything.
And somewhere a computer is saying, "I'm blogging."
Yes, right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I suppose I don't see it entirely as the way the web is ruined, but, being hosted on Perplexity, I think is a limiting factor, but it's, I don't know. It seems like a way to organize what you're already doing in a different way. And I think the shareability of that might be the aspect that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think shareability is good because I think you can have you can show your work. I just wrote a post and I got research, and here's where you can look at my research or my organization of it. Here's a query I've made, and I'd like to build it collaboratively with others to be able to share that and build upon it. I think has value. No, I'm okay with all of that, but I just know how it's going to be used, even not nefariously, just greedily.
Yeah, and maybe lazily as well.
Exactly, and by many a student.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Teacher.
Real quick before we end the show. Last night, my older daughter, she's graduating from 8th grade, going to high school, and she was picked to read like a graduation speech for her school. And so I was sitting, with her in her room as we were kind of like copy editing, and she's like, here's my speech. I read it out today, and everybody told me it was too long. And boy, my first instinct was, well, we could just put it into Perplexity and say, tighten this up. And I mean, but I didn't.
Did you?
No, I didn't. No, I did not go there, because like, what is she going to learn, And so we spent a half an hour kind of tightening it up and got it to a wonderful place. But it was just something that I noted for myself. I was like, oof. Not ready to go there yet. Not yet, Jason. So that's where we're at. But anyways, Jeff, great episode, great conversation with Joseph Cox. So happy you could be here for that. And
making that happen.
Absolutely. And what do you want to leave people with? Gutenberg parenthesis, of course.
Yep, that's plenty there. Gutenbergparenthesis.com has discount codes for my 2 books that are out now, Magazine and Gutenberg Parenthesis. And I'm just going to brag for a second. The Sharp News, which is the journal for the field of book history, just reviewed Gutenberg Parenthesis and said wonderful things about it. And that makes me very happy, because I was afraid that the real academics who study what I write about would say, what's he doing here? He shouldn't be writing about this. He's a schmuck. But there was a very nice review, and I'm very grateful.
Right on. And you deserve it. That's awesome. Gutenbergparenthesis.com. And then let's see here. What else do we got? Well, if you want to normally, if you want to catch the show live, you can do that on the YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/@Techsploder, where it streams live. You can kind of see the live streams are usually cataloged there. We are not going to have live shows for the next few weeks. I think it's the next 3 episodes are going to be pre-recorded. They're going to be released every Wednesday, right around the normal time that we would normally do a live show, probably around noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. And so if you're subscribed to the podcast, you don't need to do anything different. You're just going to get the podcast delivered to you automatically. If you want to watch the video version, you can just go to YouTube on Wednesday, the @TechSploder YouTube channel, and you'll find those episodes as they are released because we've pre-recorded.
So Jason could have taken an actual vacation and gone off the show, but he wouldn't do that to you. He wouldn't leave you. So don't leave him. Make sure you watch these shows.
Too many years in podcasting. It's really hard for me to miss a week. And so I've tried really hard to make that not happen. So thank you for clearing your schedule, Jeff, because I know that's, that's
pleasure.
also on you to make that happen as well along with me.
So far we've had two really good conversations, and we have another one recording on Monday. And so you'll have good shows to listen to.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Great stuff you have to look forward to. Let's see here. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show to support us directly. I'll just go ahead and say our executive producers of this show, Dr. Dew, Jeffrey Maricini, WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. Thank you for supporting us. Do like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you happen to listen, because all of that increases the visibility of this show, and we can't thank you enough when you do that. Thank you, everybody. AIinside.show is the single place. If you want one place to go, that's where you can find everything you need to know. And we'll see you next week with some pre-records, and I'll see you probably in about a month with another live episode of AI Inside. Enjoy your break, Jeff. We'll see you later.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.